Hello, fight fans, and welcome to another edition of Monday Night Fight Talk. We are coming off of one of the most exciting pay-per-views ever. I mean, we had a bunch of great fights. We had a huge upset with Aljamain Sterling retaining the title, becoming the undisputed champion. And doing it the right way. We had Khamzat Chimaev continue his hype train going forward, beating the number 2 ranked welterweight in the world in Gilbert Burns. Alexander Volkanovski put on an absolute clinic against the Korean Zombie. Plus so much more happened 2 nights ago, last Saturday at UFC 273. Plus, in addition, I will be giving my predictions for the fight night coming up this next weekend, headlined by Vicente Luque and Belal Muhammad. So stay tuned for that, but let's start off with UFC 273. I want to start off with the first fight of the night because it started off very, very strong. Julio Arce versus Daniel Santos. Julio Arce looked really, really good in this fight, and you could tell that he had a lot more experience than Daniel Santos. Daniel Santos did not look bad, but you could definitely tell he had some inexperience. He tended to throw a lot of spinning power punches, just kind of more flashy, while Julio Arce was very technical, and he landed at a very, very high strike. I mean, you look at the numbers, Daniel Santos only landed 21% of his strikes in that fight, and then you look at Arce, who was at almost a 50% clip on over 200 strikes thrown. So there was definitely an experience barrier. I wouldn't be too fast to sleep on Daniel Santos. He has a great camp. I mean, we saw Charles Oliveira, the lightweight champion right now, is in his corner. He also trains with Diego Lima. So, I mean, he has some people in his corner, but he definitely needs to grow up a little bit. I know that sounds harsh, and I don't mean it to, but, he just needs to mature in the octagon a little bit more. Try not to go for the one-punch knockout every single time, because sometimes it's not there. Julio Arce, though, a phenomenal performance. You could definitely, again, tell that he had the experience going into the fight, and great win for him. The next fight, Piera Rodriguez continues her undefeated record streak, and in her UFC debut against a great fighter in Kay Hansen. It was actually a really entertaining fight. Kay Hansen came out in that first round, and she looked really good. She was able to get Piera Rodriguez on the ground, and that's Kay Hansen's world. If she can get the fight to the ground, that is where she is the most comfortable, and you could definitely tell that was 100% her game plan, was to try to get this fight to the ground. It worked in the first round, but then the second and third round, Piera Rodriguez was phenomenal with the takedown defense. She was phenomenal all around. She won those second 2 rounds 2 and 3, very clearly. It was a very, very impressive performance. And great debut for Rodriguez, great debut win, and I can't wait to see where she ends up going in the strawweight division, which, I mean, as we know, the strawweight division is really the deepest one of the women's division, so I'm very excited to see her fight some of those top-notch fighters. And then the next fight, Alexei Oleinik puts on a classic Alexei Oleinik performance to earn his 60th pro MMA win. He has 60 pro MMA wins, and 47 of those wins are by submission. That is there's UFC fighters, some of the greatest UFC fighters that you've ever heard of have never had 47 fights, professional fights. And this guy, Alexei Oleinik, has 47 MMA wins by submission alone. there's a reason they call him the boa constrictor. He was able to get the choke. Vanderaa actually looked okay in the beginning. He was able to get Oleinik on the ground. I'm not sure why he wanted to go to the ground with Oleinik, but then once Oleinik got on top, it was basically just counting the seconds until Oleinik was able to get in a choke or any sort of submission and win the fight, and that's exactly what he did. Huge milestone for Oleinik, though. 60th win again. I mean, you don't hear about that very often. Guys getting 60 pro MMA wins. So congratulations to Oleinik, and he looked fantastic doing so. Moving on from the early prelims to just the regular prelims, started off with Mike Mallet having a tremendous performance against Mickey Gall. This was a close matchup going in, and honestly, Mallet looked phenomenal. He looked almost a step ahead of Mickey Gall the entire fight, and I want to say that Mickey Gall was the favorite, according to Vegas, of course. So, I mean, that's not always the greatest prediction mechanism when it comes to UFC fights, but I mean, Mallet literally looked outmatched. Mickey Gall looked outmatched to Mallet, and I mean, he was hitting. Mallet was hitting him with everything, and then eventually he got that left hook that hit him right on the button and was able to finish the fight off that way. Great performance by Mike Mallet. And then there was a women's fight where it went the complete opposite way of what I thought it was going to go. Raquel Pennington puts her name back on the map in the women's bantamweight division with a win over a top 5 opponent on short notice. Aspen Ladd, I mean, I expected a lot more out of Aspen Ladd, a whole lot more than what she came out with. She climbed her way all the way up to a top 5 spot, and this fight, she just didn't seem that the volume that she usually produces wasn't there. She seemed a little more hesitant. Or a lot more hesitant, actually. And she just didn't seem to do enough to even be considered a winner on any of these rounds. But honestly, it was a great performance by Raquel Pennington. All the props in the world to Raquel Pennington. This might even land her a top 5 ranking for all we know at the beginning of this week. The ranking should be coming out later tonight, but this could honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if they gave Raquel Pennington another top 5 opponent now, and if she can get 2 top 5 wins, what's stopping her from being in that title picture? There's tons of Irene Aldana. She was supposed to fight Aspen Ladd, but now she doesn't have a fight. We could see Raquel Pennington now versus Aldana, or even Holly Holm. Holly Holm right now, I don't believe officially has a fight. I know there was some talks, but I can't remember who the opponent was, but there was some talks about Holly Holm getting a fight, but nothing has been signed official yet. So, I mean, I really would not be surprised to see Raquel Pennington get another top 5 opponent in her next fight. The next fight, Anthony Hernandez has a fairly dominant victory, but I still want to give some props to Joshua Fremd. I mean, Fremd took this fight on 10 days' notice. I want to say this was also his UFC debut, so it wasn't a Raquel Pennington type situation where Raquel Pennington was the number 7 ranked bantamweight before this fight. So we all know Raquel Pennington. Joshua Fremd came in this fight very short notice, and he actually put on a very, very good performance. I was very impressed by him. Anthony Hernandez was relentless, and Anthony Hernandez very clearly won this fight. There was no debate about that. But to have someone be that relentless to attempt that many guillotine chokes. I have never seen that many guillotine chokes attempted in one fight, ever. That was insane. And to be able to get out every single one, when there was some, or even the Darce choke, I mean, he would switch back and forth from a Darce choke to a guillotine, stuff like that. But I've never seen someone slip out of so many, and there was some that were really, really deep. I thought that he was going to tap, but especially I believe it was at the end of the second round where Anthony Hernandez has him in that choke, and Herb Dean even comes down to check on him, and Joshua Friend just thumbs up him. He's fine. He's just chilling. He can't get out of it, but he's not getting choked out. Very, very good, but good performance by both. But props to Anthony Hernandez more, obviously, for getting the victory. And now for the premier prelim, Ian Gary shows off tremendous takedown defense and unbelievably accurate striking. I mean, this guy in the octagon he is a spitting image of Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. They fight the exact same way. They get these weird angles, and they are so accurate with their strikes. They're so precise. It's amazing to watch. And then Darian Weeks, who is, like I was saying last week, I know he doesn't have the biggest resume of a pro MMA fighter, but he is relentless. He is a monster. And Ian Gary did not have really any points in this fight where he looked like he was in real trouble. He stuffed almost every single takedown, if not every single takedown that was thrown, and he again was just landing everything it seemed that he threw. So huge props. This was a big showing for Ian Gary. I definitely wouldn't be surprised if we saw him against a ranked opponent next, somebody in that 13 to 15 range of that weight class. And I think it would be very, very deserving for Ian Gary because that was a tremendous performance, almost flawless. Now going on to the main card, Mark Madsen narrowly escapes with his undefeated record against Vince Pichel. This fight had the chance to be fight of the night, to be honest, before the next two fights after this happened. But these are two tough guys going back and forth. One's a wrestler, one's a very good striker. Ultimately, Madsen's wrestling got him a little bit more points, but honestly, if they would have given that fight to Pichel, I wouldn't have been totally against it. The only round I think that Mark Madsen clearly won was round 3, but you could still almost make an argument about that round because Mark Madsen took him to the ground and didn't do much beyond that. He kind of just laid on top of him. But that's sometimes how wrestlers win these fights. I know Vince Pichel was moving around a lot, so there wasn't a whole lot for Mark Madsen to do. But still, he escaped with the victory. He stays undefeated. Another guy that I could see against a ranked opponent in that division in his next fight. Just to try to prove his name a little bit more because he hasn't faced that ranked opponent yet. But big win for Mark Madsen against a tough guy like Vince Pichel. Now a fight that I was so excited. I was so excited for this fight coming into it. Mackenzie Dern gets back on the winning side with a very, very close split decision victory over Tisha Torres. This fight was crazy. I honestly had Tisha Torres winning this fight. Round 1 was really the round that was needing to be decided by the judges. Round 2, the grappling took over for Mackenzie Dern. She clearly won round 2. There was no doubt about that. They were even in some crazy positions. I've never seen someone straddle someone standing up and trying to get a Kimura in at the same time. That was insane. And then round 3, Tisha Torres was able to stop the grappling. She was able to use her striking, and she very, very clearly won round 3. I personally thought that Torres did a little bit more in the first round. But again, it was really, really close. I personally gave it to Torres, but obviously 2 of the judges gave it to Mackenzie Dern. I'm not upset about that. I think that Mackenzie Dern did put on a great performance. I'm by no means upset that she got the victory, but huge props to get her back on the winning side of things. The only thing that sucks is, unless Yan Shannon steps up, there's really no other fight for Mackenzie Dern, at least in terms of people that are ranked higher than her. Marina Rodriguez, she just lost to in a fairly dominant fashion, so I doubt they're going to make that fight again. Carla Esparza and Rose are fighting for the title. I believe that's set up for May. It's the next pay-per-view, May, UFC 274. And then you have Yang Wei Li and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. That's on the pay-per-view in June. That just got signed, which also, I mean, come on. How can you not be excited about that fight? That was the greatest women's fight in history. And now they're going to rematch on probably like the 4th fight of that card. That card's stacked. That card is unbelievably stacked. But again, besides Yan Shannon, that's the only lady that's ahead of her right now that doesn't already have another fight. But also, Yan Shannon's coming off 2 straight losses. Granted, to Carla Esparza and Marina Rodriguez, but I'm not sure the Yan Shannon win is weighted as heavy as it used to be. So it's tough to see where Mackenzie goes from here. I would imagine that she does fight Yan Shannon, but again, I don't know how much that's going to get her closer to a title shot, especially with the ladies in front of her. Those are some very, very big names. Somebody, I actually just thought of this off the top of my head. Jessica Andrade beats Amanda Lemos, or Amanda Lemos beats Jessica Andrade in a couple weeks. Maybe that's a fight that they make for Mackenzie Dern, but we'll have to see how that one pans out. I believe that one's headlining the April 23rd fight night. But moving on to, a fight of the year candidate already in April. Gilbert Burns and Khamzat Chimaev put on a show that if you've never watched MMA in your life, this would be one of the fights that I told you to go watch, and I can almost guarantee that you'd be instantly hooked. This fight was a absolute war. You have to give undeniable props to both of these guys. Gilbert Burns, I really, really hope they do not drop him that much in the rankings, because he went to war with someone that almost everybody else in that division has avoided. And he went in there, went to war. Before this fight, I think I said this last week, Khamzat Chimaev had absorbed one significant strike from his opponents. His past 3 opponents before that. This was his 4th UFC fight. Gilbert Burns landed 119 significant strikes on Khamzat Chimaev. And he even rocked Khamzat Chimaev at the end of the 2nd round. Khamzat really almost got saved by the bell in that round, and Khamzat lost that round. That was the first round that Khamzat Chimaev has lost in his professional MMA career. And this was an absolute war. Huge props to both fighters. I know I keep talking about Gilbert Burns, but Khamzat Chimaev was actually the winner of this fight. And to come in having so much hype around you. I mean, we haven't had this much hype for a fighter 3 fights into his UFC career in a very, very long time. He just went in and beat the number 2 welterweight in the world. And people are still disrespecting him. He got beat up. Well, yeah, Gilbert Burns is a monster. Anybody that thinks that that wasn't going to be a great fight, I thought Chimaev was going to handle him a little easier, but I have to give huge props to Khamzat Chimaev for even winning that fight. To go in your fourth UFC fight. This guy started MMA 4 years ago, Khamzat Chimaev did. And 4 years later, he's beating the number 2 guy at his weight class. The hype is real on this guy. He is an undeniable talent. He is an absolute monster. And I cannot wait to see where he goes from here. A lot of people think that Colby Covington is next in line for Khamzat Chimaev. I don't know about that. Colby Covington hasn't fought a top 5 contender besides Kamaru Usman in a very long time. So I don't know if Colby Covington's going to say yes to that fight. One thing I can see, the headliner this weekend, whoever wins this fight between Luque and Muhammad is still a fight away from getting a welterweight title shot, in my opinion. I think you make Chimaev versus the winner of that fight number 1 contender matchup. Just a thought. But I think Colby Covington would be a good fight for Chimaev. Obviously, I mean, Colby Covington's the number 1 ranked welterweight. But I don't know if Colby Covington himself takes that fight. But we'll have to wait and see. Moving on to the first of the 2 title fights. Aljamain Sterling, like I said in the beginning, he retains his title. He becomes the undisputed champion. In a very, very controversial decision. A lot of people weren't happy with this decision. I wouldn't say that I'm unhappy with it, but I definitely I think Jan won the fight. Rounds 2 and 3, Sterling dominated. Sterling absolutely dominated rounds 2 and 3. Petr Yan came back, won rounds 4 and 5. So again, just like the Mackenzie Dern-Tisha Torres fight, this fight really came down to the first round. And this first round was not a lot of stuff happened. Aljamain Sterling was a little more active. He was throwing a lot of body kicks. But other than that, there was really nothing from either side. Petr Yan really dominated the entire octagon. He controlled it. And I guess it really depends on how much you weigh octagon control. I don't normally weigh it too heavily, but at the same time, when there's a round like that first round where not a lot of stuff happened, you kind of got to do stuff like this. But at the same time, I really do think Jan won that fight, but that's not to take anything away from Aljamain Sterling. Aljamain Sterling fought a great fight. The only thing that I thought was going to happen, or thought could cause some controversy, I thought that Petr Yan was going to get rounds 1, 4, and 5, but I wasn't sure if they were going to 10-8 for Sterling in rounds 2 and 3. That's how much he dominated both of those rounds. I would imagine that they would only 10-8 one of those rounds. But that was my thing. Was it going to be a draw? And that would have led to some madness if those two, the way the first fight ended, and then to end in a draw for the second fight. But nonetheless, you still got to give your props to Aljo. Aljamain Sterling looked very good in rounds 2 and 3. He looked pretty good in round 1. You could definitely tell that Petr Yan figured him out rounds 4 and 5. In the eyes of the judges, that was too little too late. Congratulations, Aljamain Sterling. I think he's going to have a very decent title reign unless they give Petr Yan another fight. Because honestly, right now, Petr Yan is the only one in that deep bantamweight division that I could see beating Aljamain Sterling. I don't see TJ Dillashaw beating Aljamain Sterling. I think Aljamain Sterling would win that fight fairly easily. Again, huge props to him. Can't fault him for the judges arguably making the wrong decision. Now for a fight that didn't need to go to the judges, and even if it did, we all know what would have happened. Alexander Volkanovski continues his reign of dominance with a perfect, and I mean that in the literal sense, perfect performance versus the Korean Zombie. I was a little bummed. I'm not going to lie, I was kind of rooting for Korean Zombie just because, like, it'd be cool to see a guy like him get a title. But it's not, again, no disrespect to Alexander Volkanovski. I like Volk. But I just really wanted to see a guy like Korean Zombie get a title. But nonetheless, this fight was not close. Volk showed that he was far and beyond superior to Korean Zombie. I'm very surprised that Zombie's corner even let him come back out for that fourth round. I think they should have thrown in the towel for him. Obviously, if you ask the fighter, he's not going to say yes to wanting to come out. So I think that they should have called it. I think it was a great stoppage by Herb Dean in that fourth round, because all you're going to do if Alexander Volkanovski keeps punching him is potentially end this guy's career. And a huge respect to Alexander Volkanovski. I don't know if everybody saw it, but I saw a clip of him walking in on the fourth round, and he looks at Chan Sung Jung and he says, "Are you sure?" And he says yes, and they continue to fight it out. Obviously, it didn't last much longer than that, but huge props to both fighters. I mean, it's really hard to see unless Max Holloway is able to take the title from him in their third fight. That's probably going to happen next, I would imagine. It's hard to see anyone even coming close to Alexander Volkanovski at this point. I know Henry Cejudo just entered back into the USDA testing pool. So, I mean, Henry Cejudo could cause some problems. But he's also coming off 2 years without having a UFC fight, at least 2 years. Might even be more. So, Henry Cejudo could, but as of people that are in the featherweight division right now, that are fighting right now, it's Max Holloway. That's the only real contender. And Alexander Volkanovski even called out the whole division. He called out the entire division and said basically step up and be better. And give me some competition here, because that's how much he's dominating. So huge props to Volkanovski. He is a top 5 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Arguably the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. But flawless performance by him. But that's enough about UFC 273. Now I want to get into my fight picks for the UFC Fight Night coming up this Saturday, headlined again by Belal Muhammad versus Vicente Luque. The first fight I want to talk about on this card, Estela Nunez versus Samantha Hughes. This is a very, very interesting matchup coming in with the strawweight division. Sam Hughes is actually coming down from the flyweight division. Both fighters are fairly inexperienced. Neither of them have a 10 wins, or not 10 wins, 10 professional fights for that matter. So both of them are fairly inexperienced. Hughes will definitely want to get this fight to the ground. She has tremendous jiu-jitsu, where Estela Nunez is definitely going to look to keep this fight on her feet. She's living up to the Nunez name. I don't think that they're related at all, her and Amanda, but she's living up to the name and having tremendous striking. But ultimately, I do think that Nunez is going to pull this win off. I'm a little worried about Sam Hughes coming down a weight class. Because, I mean, 115 can be very tough to cut down to. So I'm a little worried about her gas tank and her cardio and everything. I think that Nunez is going to pull off a very close decision victory for this one. The next fight I want to talk about, we're going all the way the other direction. So we're at the small 115 ladies. We're going to the 265 guys. The big boys, Chris Barnett versus Martin Buday, who is actually making his UFC debut. This is a classic heavyweight matchup. Two big old heavyweights that hit hard as hell. So I'm very excited about this fight. I hope it ends in the first round because I don't know if these two are going to be able to go much farther than the first round. I really like Buday in this fight in his UFC debut. I know Barnett's ended his last year on a high note with a win, but I'm really digging what Martin Buday is bringing to the table. I think he knocks out Chris Barnett in the first round, gets a win in his UFC debut. Next fight I want to talk about, the premier prelim of the night, Rafa Garcia versus Jesse Ronson. I'm incredibly excited about this fight. This is near the top for fights I'm most excited about for this weekend. Both guys are insanely well-rounded, but contrasting styles and what their specialty is. Ronson is a great striker, but can get the fight to the ground too if he needs to, while Garcia has tremendous wrestling, tremendous jiu-jitsu. I mean, Rafa Garcia averages 4 takedowns per 15 minutes, while Ronson only has a 61% takedown defense. And I think that might come into play very heavily in this fight. I think that Rafa Garcia will be able to get this fight to the ground, and that's where his world is. That's what he relies on, is getting the fight to the ground. I have Garcia winning this fight as a 3rd-round submission. The next fight I want to talk about is one of the first fights on the main card, Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos versus Mounir Lazzez. This is going to be an absolute banger of a fight. Two guys that hit incredibly hard, but contrasting styles. Dos Santos will definitely like to keep this on the feet. He is very much a stand-up striker. Mounir Lazzez is a suffocating wrestler and has tremendous ground and pound. He is an absolute monster on the ground. I honestly think that with Dos Santos, again, he's another guy that doesn't have the greatest takedown defense. Only 62% takedown defense. Not great versus a guy like Lazzez. That's going to be a huge disadvantage of this fight. I have Lazzez winning this fight via 2nd round TKO. The next fight is Pat Sabatini versus TJ Laramie. I'm pretty excited about this fight. This is a fight I don't see being on the feet very much. So if you're very much a striker fan, a stand-up striking matchup, this is not going to be the fight for you. Both guys average over 2.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. Laramie's more of a wrestler, where Sabatini is definitely more of a jiu-jitsu specialist. So, I mean, that could play a big advantage for him, and I think it will, as he'll probably be able to win the fight on his back or on top. So I am going to say that Sabatini comes out on top. I wouldn't be surprised if TJ won this fight, but I'm going to predict that Sabatini's going to win by decision. Just he's going to do more with the ground game, I think. I think TJ's going to be a little more hesitant to try to do a whole lot on the ground, where Sabatini could just get him a submission very easily. So I think that's going to play a big factor, Sabatini by decision in this one. The next fight, as of right now, the UFC has it as the co-main event, UFC.com does. I think that's going to change, though. I heard that there's a couple guys making their UFC debut that's going to move to the co-main event. But I want to talk about this one. Mayra Bueno Silva versus Wu Yanan. A jiu-jitsu specialist versus a tremendous striker. Bueno Silva has tremendous jiu-jitsu. And she has faced some pretty prominent names in this division, while Yanan is definitely trying to get back on the winning side. She's dropped 3 of her last 4 fights. It's not looking too hot for her. And honestly, I think Bueno Silva should handle this fight fairly easily. She's got experience. She's got some big names on her resume. Granted, she didn't win those fights, but she still has those names on her resume. She's fought those names. I think Bueno Silva is going to win this fight very easily. I have Silva also by decision. And then let's dive right into this main event. I am so excited for this main event. Vicente Luque versus Belal Muhammad, 2 top 5 welterweights. Trying to put themselves in the championship picture. They both have some tremendous wins. They're both very exciting fighters. Belal Muhammad is a phenomenal wrestler. But I'm not sure that's going to be a big advantage versus Vicente Luque. Vicente Luque is great on the ground. He's great on his feet. He has great striking. He has great jiu-jitsu. He has great wrestling. Vicente Luque is really a complete fighter, by the definition of a complete fighter. You look at his finish rates, and I mean, submission and knockouts are like neck and neck. It's crazy how versatile this guy is. I'm saying Luque wins this fight, and I think he wins it fairly easily. I'm saying second round submission, because I do think Belal will be able to get him to the ground. Belal is a good enough wrestler to get him to the ground, but again, I don't think the wrestling is going to be a humongous advantage for him with the jiu-jitsu that Vicente Luque brings to the table. But honestly, whoever wins this fight, like I was saying earlier with the Khamzat Chimaev, I think they're 1 win away from being in the title picture, from facing Kamaru Usman. So, if Colby doesn't take the fight, if the number 1 contender doesn't take that fight, and Khamzat Chimaev needs 1 more fight before he faces Kamaru Usman, if I'm the winner of this fight, I am raising my hand so fast and saying because putting your name against Khamzat Chimaev and say whoever wins this bout beats Khamzat Chimaev, that's going to take their career off if they are able to take down the beast, to slay the beast in Khamzat Chimaev. So, I mean, if I'm one of these guys, that is 100% the fight I am taking if I win this fight. Or say they want the loser to try to get their name back on the map by trying to face a Khamzat Chimaev. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how everything plays out. But thank you all for listening. That's all for my fight picks. All my reaction for UFC 273. It was a tremendous weekend for fighting. I'm very excited for this next weekend. We have a bunch of fight nights coming up in a row and leading into the next pay-per-view, and then some fight nights after that. It sounds like we're going to have quite a few weeks in a row of fights, so we won't have some shortened shows like we did the last 2 weeks. I believe Memorial Day weekend is the next weekend. I've heard that is with no fights, so we'll have some shortened shows then. But until then, we should have our normal length shows. I'm very excited to do that with everybody. Thank you all for listening again. You can find me on Monday Night Fight Talk on Instagram and YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at MN Fight Talk. I will put all those links in the description. You can also find me every Friday at 4 on The Bolt, discussing just general sports with a few of my friends. You can find that on Squabosays YouTube channel. I will also post his link in the description. But until then, thank you all for listening, and I will see you next week, same time, same place on YouTube.